first seminar talk of the program.
Thank you very much, David. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank you, David, as well as Rich and Judith. We cannot make it here today, but for inviting me to join you to organize this program. It's a really great opportunity, and I like it very much. Okay, so today I decided to split my talk in two. So this is the first talk about structured prediction. So we are going to talk about supervised graph prediction. But if you have attended the talk of Rémi, for instance, I won't go beyond kernel losses, and I won't reach, let's say, the optimal transport loss, because I have many things to say, and I prefer to split in two, so we have other opportunity to discuss. But feel free to ask questions about that. I will answer, of course. Okay, so this is this work specifically is a joint work with some of my PhD students, Tamim, Tuintier, Luc, and Pierre in different times. Okay, and the motivation is the following. Imagine that in a wet lab you have a biological sample, you put it in a mass spectrometer, and you have the possibility to measure the masses of atoms inside this biological sample. And what you want to do is to be able to retrieve or discover de novo the metabolites which are inside this sample. Okay, and we, as machine learning people, we state this problem as a supervised graph prediction problem, or if you prefer, as Anna said, the graph valued regression problem, meaning that it's a classical problem where you are going to collect input and output data. It will be our training sample, and we will try to estimate a function that from the given mass spectra gives you a molecule. So we will focus on a single molecule. So we may imagine that we have already do several fragmentation to have this problem focus on a single metabolite. So, of course, the idea seems nice. I mean, biochemists collect this data, and it looks like a classic supervised learning problem. Like you have a training sample. Of course, we are going to assume some ID assumption, some fixed but unknown probability distribution for the joint variable x and y. And we have assumed that these variables live in space x for the input and space y for the output. Okay. So it looks like a classical problem. The statistical learning problem in this case is the idea of having this sample, it's a training sample, to estimate the solution of a general problem, which is stated as the minimization of a loss function, delta, that tells you how much your prediction is close to your target variable or output variable, here a graph. Okay. And of course, usually what you do, you leverage empirical risk minimization and potentially regularized empirical risk minimization. But in fact, of course, as you know, the problem is a bit complex, because we have not the structured object in the input space, which is a classic way. We know how to deal this with kernels. But in this case, we have this graph structure in the output. And of course, the set of graph has not a nice vector space structure, because, well, the set of graph up to some number of nodes is of course finite. And the graph have different size, and moreover, the graph has the bad idea to be potentially isomorphic to other graph if you exchange the indexing of the nodes. Okay, so typically this is not good for us, because what we know very well is to do regression in vector space, okay, and especially in Euclidean space, okay. So what we are going to do here in this talk is to come back to the problems that we know, okay. And the idea is the following. I will give along this talk the example of a square loss function. What I'm going to do, I'm going to not to work directly in the graph space, but I'm going to define a similarity between graphs that will enjoy the property of a positive symmetric definite kernel. I will call it KY. The notation is a bit ugly, but you will see why, because I will have a kernel in the input space as well as a kernel in output space, okay? And the idea is that I'm going to embed my graph with the means of the canonical feature map, which I will denote by psi y, and which is nothing else than the functions, the kernel function, okay, anchored on the given y. Okay, and you see, if you take the square loss, you see the benefit of using kernels. Well, in terms of computation, each time you have inner product, you will in fact only compute kernel value. So a bit further, the general idea is the following: you have some input space, here the space of mass spectra. You have an output space, here this set of graph up to some label graph up to some number of nodes with node labeled in some alphabet. And what you want to do is to convert. Yeah. I'm going to convert this problem into another one, where here I will define a Hilbert space, okay? And here what I'm going to do, I'm going to present you just the method in a general term, okay? For the moment, just forget about the kernel graph, and just imagine that here, instead of having y, I want a Hilbert space, okay? So that I can do regression from x to z and learn a function that will be vectored value in this Hilbert space. And at some point, I want to come back with a decoding function and go to y. Okay. And this will be the general framework, even when we use, for instance, optimal loss transport, when we want to use this kind of approach. So, you know, this is called surrogate regression, because instead of solving the problem at the beginning, you solve instead a surrogate problem. Okay. So first remark, you can do that with other things than kernels, but it's true that kernels are very convenient to define this space. Okay. So here, what we're going to do, then will be nothing else than the reproducing kernel Hilbert space defined by the kernel between graphs. Okay. And so it will be linked with the graph. We'll have the information about the graph property through this kernel. Okay. And effectively, the feature map here will be the canonical feature map. And at some point, of course, it won't be invertible, so we'll have to come back with an approximative procedure that will be a decoding or pre-image step. Okay, so in fact, we did a lot of things in this area with my students for many kind of function, and in general, far beyond the square loss. Okay. In fact, what you need to have is two things. First, you need to be able to compute your loss. So somehow, the computation of the loss need to be only with inner product, with a value of k. And second, you have, if you have a Reporter theorem, if you can nicely write your solution with a non-parametric model that is depending on the value of the training data, not exactly the yi, but the psi of yi, well, the decoding problem is then really easy. So we need a lot of things, but today I want to come back and to present you the idea with a square loss function, because we have come back to this idea to scale it using sketching. And then we use it also to learn a deep neural network. Okay. So let's go. So don't worry if you see psi or psi y. Currently, it's the same thing. Okay, I mixed several slides, so sometimes psi y does not appear, but it will have its function at some point. Okay, so this is a very classical problem. Okay, this is a ridge regression problem. So in practice, what we do, we begin to define from the training data a surrogate regression problem where h is a function with values in a reproducing canal Hilbert space. Okay. One possibility, one interesting possibility is to look at this norm and to minimize it, to penalize the solution with this norm in the reproducing kernel space HK. And then I need to speak a little bit about HK. So what is HK here? This is the reproducing kernel space with vector valued function, okay? And to build vector valued function, you cannot rely on scalar kernel, but you have to rely on operator valued kernel. Okay, I will come back a while into that. So let's solve this problem, and then if we want to decode, still in the empirical case, what we do, well, we get this value, okay, and we try to find the best y in the set. So generally not in the whole set, which is, as you know, super exponential. What you are going to look at is, in general, a candidate set. Okay. So, of course, this will be a limitation of the method. Okay. So, contrary to this step, where you can define different target and reach different targets in this output space, here, at the end, the decoding step at inference time, when really you want to retrieve a molecule will be limited by this step.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it obvious to be able to design reproducing kernel K-dot HK such that the values of the function h at xi will belong to h1?
Yeah. It's not obvious, but there is a machinery.
Techniques.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah. I can give you some more detail. Just I'm going to look if I have more information, but I can give it to you. May I use the Blackboard? Okay. So yes. So yeah, absolutely. So it's not in this slide because the slide were for the audience. Sorry.
Here. I don't know how it's going to appear on the recording.
I think it'll be fine.
Okay. Okay, so basically, I mean, the idea is that when you want to build a function that are vector valued function, okay, let's say that you just want to have Z, which is a Hilbert space for the moment, okay, and then we'll have the. So then what you are going to do, you are going to use operator valued kernel, okay. To give you an idea, you can think about matrix valued kernel and finite valued multivariate case, okay, for functions. And in this case, in fact, you will define matrices, okay, to build vectors, okay. And the idea is that at dimension 1, scalar valued kernel, you have just a scalar value. In the finite dimensional case, with vector valued function, you have matrix value, and then you have operator value. Okay, and you will have a similar property. So basically, I mean, you will not have exactly the symmetry. This is something that you won't have. And you have similar property very close to SDP. And you have the building of HK, okay, and HK will be again the completion of a span, okay, of functions that you will construct this way, okay. If I use dot to say that I have one valued function, okay, I will construct a function like this, okay, with and I will complete this. Okay, so this will be the repulsive kernel space, okay, with good property for the operator valued kernel, okay, to have this. And in the specific case of, as you said, well, we specifically want that this is a repulsive kernel space defined by a kernel between the Y, okay, well, we'll have here. So very nicely, we have representer the reproducing property, and we have a operator theorem. Okay, so meaning that you have a solution which is when you minimize a loss with a minimal interponent norm condition. Okay, you have this kind of function. Okay? And the reproducing property it's involved inner product in Z in D instead of directly of the value of the function. Okay.
Just one question. So when you do that, if you have a reproducible, so H is an RK, C is an RKHS, so your
In my
prediction
case,
function, instead of being just a sum over the X, is going to be a sum over the X and the Y's of your training data.
Yeah, so that's something to be proved, and we have proved it, but
Okay.
it's not in always cases.
Okay.
Okay, so the classic operator theorem, okay, Micheli and Ponty,
Yeah. That,
2005, it says that. Okay, then with Céline Brehard, we improve it for convex loss, and it was just proven for the square loss. And then with Pierre Lafforgue, we generalize it in a way, so it's one of the results I could have also showed you in the following way. So what we do, we have conditions on the operator valued kernel. Basically, the operator valued kernel values have to be invariant with the spine of k dot yi, okay, and second, the loss convex, yes, but there are a bit of more than that. There is a nice condition about the Legendre function Legendre transform loss. When you have that, you dualize the problem, and by optimization, you find a operator theorem. And the form of the operator theorem is the following. So it's thesis of Pierre Lafforgue, one of my students, is the following. Okay. You can't see it?
No.
Not at all. So in the black part, you can.
These parts, it's okay.
This part, you
Yeah.
can. Okay, thank you, Gabriel. So
It's funny because you see it better.
you have a loss, okay,
Degrees of-
that okay, it's not the same notation, let's call it it's I, that you minimize. Okay. Okay, and when you do that, okay, with f of x plus some mid assumption about the Legendre transform of L. Basically, it computes well. There is some nice property with infinite convolution, some property about the value of k prime. You have this very interesting and much more informative, where you have a combination of the training data and it's called, you see, think about any non-parametric model. In the classic scalar case, you have just like an average, and you have your data that appears somewhere. Okay, so typically here, but here now you have vectored value things. Okay, and the idea is that you have a combination of the training data. So you express your solution in terms of your training data, but leveraging an operator valued kernel, okay, that depends on xi. So xi, of course, play a role, okay, and they d play a role as well, okay. In the question session, I can come back to that if you want. Does it answer?
Yeah,
Violentia, I think you should
put it down.
Oh.
down.
So where are we? We are here. Okay, I will try to. I didn't put the chronometer. Okay, so just I will come back to that. Well, I will come back to that if we talk about other losses. But let's say in parallel of what we have done in my group, there is another group that got interested into this domain, and let's say it took a kind of parallel road. Okay, so in some part it coincides with our work, in some part not. And the idea was the following: Siliberto and Rudy and colleagues, okay, have studied the estimators that you can, well, the statistical guarantee of the estimator that you get from a surrogate regression problem. So basically, the idea is the following. So there is a bit of mistake, but here, typo. But basically, the idea is the following. If H star is the minimizer of the expectation of the square norm of psi y minus hx. So basically, if h star is a regression function that to x associates the expectation of psi of y given x. If you have that, then you can show that when you decode f star as the argmin of this norm minus h star, okay, here, well, in fact, you get exactly the minimizer of your original problem. Okay, so you have Fisher consistency, so of course it's an important problem. And of course, if you look at excess risk of now your estimator, so f hat, well, it is this excess risk is governed by the excess risk of h, as you can expect. But of course, this is an important result. And if you want to go beyond square loss, but still keep the idea that when you do the regression problem, you will refer to square loss, okay, but changing the delta while keeping this idea of square regression for the surrogate problem. Well, you can use what they have called the implicit loss embedding property. This is the idea that if you have a loss, okay, and it can be written as an inner product in some Hilbert space where you have a function that take y and y prime in our case and embed them into this Hilbert space. Well, if this loss function is an inner product, you can get similar solution. So of course the idea is, when do you get such a loss? Well, there are pretty many conditions where you can get such a loss. So it's quite interesting. And optimal transport loss, for instance, satisfy the Euler property. Okay, so let's look at this one, and I will need a bit more writing here to introduce you a solution of this problem. So I'm going to introduce you one specific operator valued kernel that we use here. It's called it's a decomposable kernel, and it's of course a kernel on x prime. Okay, and the idea is very simple. You take a scalar kernel between x and x prime. So you take your preferred kernel between mass spectra to compare these two distribution of Diracs. Okay, and you compute it. And then what you do, you multiply by the identity operator, but on the target space, the output space, which is the reproducing kernel Hilbert space. Okay. And I'm going to give you an idea of it in a finite dimensional case, but in the general case here, it's very interesting because it allows you to work effectively on the output with a very simple form, and you can imagine why the calculations are quite simplified by the identity operator, but still it's quite powerful. So I'm going to give you the intuition behind this identity, the decomposable identity kernel. So imagine that you want to solve a finite dimensional vectored valued regression problem, okay, and you take a matrix valued kernel. So if you look at the matrix valued kernel, you can say, okay, imagine that I want to come back to the very simple case where all the output are independent. Well, it's very simple. I will take a decomposable kernel. I will take scalar valued kernel kxx prime times a matrix with identity. If I put identity here, so let me write it again. If I use let's look at this. In the case, I have a P times P SDP matrix. This is a matrix valued kernel, okay? But imagine that I'm looking at all the simple case, okay? If I take A as the identity, okay, I'm just not taking into account any interaction, okay? And then if you have arbitrary matrix here, you can show that, this can be seen by looking at the norm induced by this kernel. You can show that if you have kind of graph relationship between the output, okay, you can embed it into A, okay. You can choose A, for instance, as the inverse of the Laplacian, or even sometimes the Laplacian itself, to embed the information about the relation between the different outputs. Okay. So in finite dimension, well, identity is not so interesting. Okay, you are more looking for this, and the job here is always to learn A. Okay, so we derive a few methods to learn A, for instance, and some other people also did. But in the case of infinite dimensional case, it's already rather strong to have the identity. It helps you to work. Even it's a decomposable kernel, okay, it's already very powerful. Okay, so we'll take this one. Okay. Do you have an idea what kind of things we could use instead of this one? Something practical that we can look at for the data. You could look at the empirical covariance operator of the data, okay, and use it as the operator instead of identity. Okay. So we tried that at some point for other problems, like more for multivariate time series modeling, or yeah, different kind of things, but it's sometimes a bit disappointing. So the simplest is the best. Okay. So here now what you have is something relatively classic that rings a bell for you. It's a kernel-rich problem. Okay, so the way we solve this usually is the following. We write the solution, the problem, then we use the Wolperter theorem. Here we don't need this theorem. We can just use a simple theorem, okay, that gives you this kind of form. Okay, and as in the classic kernel-rich regression, when you solve the problem in beta, okay, well, you find a nice closed form solution. Well, a nice, not so nice for people who like computing, but we have a closed form solution. I'm turning to Rémi. So what you must pay attention here is a classic thing that certainly you have already noticed, that in a kernel-rich regression problem, we have this nice writing, okay, of the solution. So in fact, it obeys also to this case, but we derive it in another way. And so the solution, okay, is a kind of conditional barycenter of the training data, and let me call it like that, okay? Conditional because it depends on X, and basically as a lot of non-parametric model, it writes in terms of the training data. Okay, but here training output data. Okay, so of course, if you want to do this, which is really convenient for us I mean, having the closed form because we are in an infinite dimensional space. There is a price to pay. There is a training complexity, which is, if you do it naively, it's n to the cube. And the decoding complexity as well. Well, maybe you are going to say that you're going to decoding with a bank of candidate molecules. Okay, so maybe not the 6 millions of metabolites, but maybe a smaller one. Okay, just for you to know, Céline Brouard showed that in 2016 that this, in case of low data regime, okay, you have the metabolite identification data set are not so big currently. I mean, this is a state-of-the-art approach. Okay, you get very good result with that. Okay, so what you want to do here, I want to show you two things. Okay, the first thing I want to show you that we can scale up a little bit this approach, and the scaling this approach for this very simple solution, kernel-rich one, will give us an idea to extend the expressivity of the model and use a deep neural network with a specific last layer in order to use as well a deep neural network, for instance, like in the case you have, for instance, text or image or a large size modality in the input. Okay. So basically, this is two papers from my student, mainly from Tamim El Ahmad, Luc Progamotte, Pierre Laforgue, and Tunji. Okay, so we call this method sketching sketch-out, and I want to say a word about sketching. So I don't know how much people know about sketching, maybe you know it very well. So sketching is a dimension reduction technique. Okay, it's based on a linear random projection, and it's backed up by Johnson and Lindenstrauss theorem or lemma, which says that you can, in a very high dimensional space, you can approximate inner product by randomly project the data into a subspace. Okay, subspace. So, in fact, has been used for a while in optimization. Okay, in general to deal with parametric model. It has also been used in a case of gradient descent, also for very large parameter, and recently also with the team of Rémi Rigonval to scale different methods, for instance, method of moments to very large data set. And in kernel, of course, well, you know, our parameters is first the data themselves. Okay, so we are going to focus on the gram matrix. Okay, and we are going to project this gram matrix, and we leverage a multiplication by a random matrix, of course. And the idea is to get a low rank, okay, to have a diminution of the computation, okay. And we the originality of this work that usually it's done in the input space. We do it in the input-output space, so it gives still a nice estimator. So if you look at sketching in kernel method, there are several ways that are connected, but it's not the same entry door. So you can mathematically it's close, but in terms of computation, it's more or less interesting depending on what you want to do. Okay. So usually what people simply do, they take the gram matrix, okay, and they replace it by this one, okay. So first, take the object K times the R, the random matrix projection. That can be sampled with the Gaussian entries, sub-Gaussian entries. You can also subsample rows and columns. Okay. And of course, the goal here, if you remember, we have an inversion. Okay. So the goal is to do the inversion on the lower rank matrix. Okay. And so, in general, we try to rewrite classic decomposition of matrix in eigenvector, eigenvalue, but through this idea of random projection. Also, what you can do, you can build random features. Okay, so you can derive random features from this projected random gram matrices. You can also start by the router theorem, okay? Start by your problem, okay? And insert at the level of the optimization problem, the random projection. So this is a bit interesting where you have to leverage more complex loss beyond square loss. And in this case, it's really interesting to start from the initial optimization problem, the one you want to solve in beta, for instance. Okay? And the angle we have taken here is just to leverage a projection operator on a random subspace of your repulsing kernel space. So here I'm writing it in the case of X, but we will do that also for the case of Y. Okay, and this is something that people have done. So for instance, Bharat Sriparam-Pulur has studied Gaussian sketching in the scalar case, leveraging sample operators and taking the point of view of operators. Rudi et al. For Nystrom approach in the scalar case also leverage this kind of approach. Okay, so I will go very fast here, just for you to know that random Fourier feature is, you know it, it's another kind of approximation. It's not at all the same spirit. Random Fourier feature is saying the following things: a shift invariant kernel obeys Bochner's theorem, so it can write as a inverse Fourier transform of the probability distribution if you normalize it correctly. And so, for instance, for Gaussian kernel, we know that the inverse Fourier transform of a Gaussian, and we know how to approximate the integral in the Fourier transform by Monte Carlo plugin. Okay, and then we get something else. But it's another kind of approximation that, in fact, is you can use both. In fact, it's not a problem. But here, what we want to do, we want to be able to deal with the non-shift invariant kernel, and we want it to keep our loss defined with our positive definite kernel, and to study our estimator and to compare it to the target function. Okay, so a bit of notation. Okay, so so that's where X and Y play a role. Okay. So Kx is a positive definite kernel symmetric on X. Okay, and I will denote its canonical feature map psi Y. Okay, and you remember that our operator valued kernel will be this one. Okay, and we have two interesting objects here, two first objects. Okay, one is what we call the sampling operators. So you take a function, okay, for instance, of a given repulsing kernel space here attached to a scalar valued kernel. Okay, and you give a value in a vector in Rn, which is nothing else as a image of f, image of x1 by f, okay, but written here as a product scalar, just to emphasize the opposing property, and this is just the application of f on your sample. And the sampling, the adjoint of the sampling operator, it's in the inverse. You have a set of coefficients, you have n coefficients, and you want to build a function, okay? And how you do that? Well, you leverage the canonical feature map, okay, and you build a linear combination, okay, and you get a function, a vector which is in hx, which is of course also a function. Okay. Maybe other notation which are so, as you imagine, I will do that for x and y. Okay, that's why I have this ugly notation. Okay, and this is well known. I mean, in the community, the solution that you can write, the solution of the previous problem, in fact, can be written in two ways. Okay, so I don't know exactly who is the first who written that, but you can see in many papers, certainly in papers of Rudi and colleagues. But it's of course present in linear ridge regression as well. I mean, you find it everywhere. So the idea is the following. I can see my solution not in terms of the Gram matrix, but in terms of covariance operator or cross-covariance operators. Okay. And then what I have approximated operator that I note H hat, okay, that apply on an element of the input for polycylindrical kernel space. So it applies to a psi of X, okay, and this operator transform it to put it in the space HKY, okay, or HY, okay? You see the idea? So if you have noticed in the talk of last week, in the talk of Arthur, use this formulation at some point. You remember with the computation, but in the case of scalar case, okay? So then you say, inspired by the work of Bharat, for instance, in the case in the scalar case, what you can say that if I want to do random projection, if I want to leverage sketching with my vector valued function, maybe it's a good idea to look not at sketching matrices, but sketching the operators, because they are really here the tools that we want to consider. And generally, if we not think only about sketching, but in general about low rank approximation, the idea that we like to find an orthogonal operator from h of x to a subspace of h of x of some finite dimension I call mx. Same thing for the output space, and we want to find a way to define this orthogonal operator. So there are different ways we can do that without even referring to sketching, but the idea is once we have such an operator, okay, we can modify the solution in this way, okay, taking care of the cross-covariance operator and the covariance operator of the input space. Okay. But now I'm going to refer to the random matrix projection. And I'm going to, there are different ways to present things. I'm going to present it like this. I like it this way. Okay, so yeah, so we are going to leverage two random matrices. Okay, one Rx of dimension mx times n, one Ry of dimension my times 1. And we want to construct this px and py. Okay, and I'm going just the idea of the input space, okay? So the idea here is that we are going to leverage the projection on the span. So the projection we are going to be interested in this one, okay? This projection is built as a linear combination for each of the random vector that constitute the basis. We are going to apply this random combination. Okay. So what I'm showing you here is if I want to look at the following vectors, there are mx vectors. Okay. All are built from this random coefficients, random combination of values of your training data through your feature map, okay? Well, you get the basis for an orthogonal projection that reduce your rank. So I'm going to show you a bit more, okay? So this is the idea, but of course, it was a bit, maybe for you, a bit difficult to see, what does it mean, really, okay? So let's come back to our operators, okay? And what we're going to do is the following. So we have, for each case, x and y, we have these covariance operators, okay? We are going to sketch each of these covariance operator, okay? So we are going to obtain tilde cx tilde cy, okay? And the way we are going to do that, well, in fact, we have the change that when we look at the eigenvalue of the covariance operator, Canel covariance operator, it's the same as the eigenvalue of the Gram matrix, and you can build the eigenfunction of your covariance operator from the eigenvectors of your Gram matrix. Okay, so what we do to build that, we do the following. So K tilde is a sketch Gram matrix. Okay, we take this sketch Gram matrix in the C+ form, and that's one form in the C+ form. Okay, we compute typically in practice with DSVD, we compute the eigenpairs, okay, eigenvectors and eigenvalues, okay, and we, with some condition, we expect that, of course, this form will be quite small because we are going to be in the good condition. And what will we have this eigenfunction that will be reconstructed using the eigenvectors of our sketch Gram matrix with some construction that depends on the sketch operator. Okay, this is normally quite good, but I want to come back and to tell you what are the computations. So the proposition, which is let's say an extension of existing property, the EI, Z I have just defined are the eigenfunction associated to the eigenvalue up to some parameter of C tilde Z. And furthermore, when you take a span of PZ of these vectors, you obtain an orthogonal projector. Okay, that's why it's a bit in terms, I mean, complicated. It looks complicated, but I mean, each time is. I wanted to show it to you, but in practice, we will only play with a Gram matrix. But I mean, this is this one, and you use this projector to simplify and reduce the dimension and the rank of the computation. Okay. So of course, if we come back to the alpha combination, alpha, let's say representation, we get some alpha tilde corresponding to this value. Okay. So the alpha is a bit complex as well. Okay, but still you can get your solution in terms of your training data, okay? And if you look at a computation, okay, the alpha tilde of x is right like this, okay? And you can recover the complete solution with a computation where you have always a sketch, one-way sketch matrices, and here the previous version of the Gram matrices. Okay, it's a bit of calculation, but there is no, I mean, there is no trap, or I mean, it's relatively well good pass. Okay. So now, of course, our interest it's not to stop at that moment. Okay. Yes, we are happy if we do that, but in fact, it's not really H where our interest. It's F. So we want to decode. Okay. And again, it's a psi of Y. Okay. And just for you, well, you can see that you can compute everything here, okay, on top, okay, as previously. As previously, you can see that in fact the first term to the square norm of this, the first term to the power 2 does not count. What is count is everything which is in relation with psi of Y, okay. And just for you to know very often what we do if we have a kernel with normalization, so k or yy is equal to 1, in fact, we write this expression, and it's interesting because also it coincides also with the Euler property as well. So the idea is the following. We have reduced the computation. I can give you more information about this. Okay. The original method, let's say the ridge one, okay, it's called here input-output kernel regression, ridge, okay. There is space and time cost at training time, and there is inference at inference time. In terms of time and space, you can also measure what you need. Okay, so always memory is a big issue in kernel methods, so it's important to talk about it, even if time, of course, is computation, but memory is always an issue also. So the 3 lines here you see, it's a different random sketch matrices. One is subsampling, so it's a classic Nystrom, which is not classic here, is to use both input and output side. P-sparsified, it's something that Tamim El-Hammad defined. It's a nice one. So it's the idea that I'm going to combine the Gaussian random matrices and the Nystrom random sketch. And I want to have both interests. So in Nystrom, you erase line and columns, rows and columns, okay? And in Gaussian, you have a lot of computation to do because you sampling a Gaussian entries, okay? And the idea is to have 0 everywhere and give a certain rate of sparsification, if you want, or you are going to fill the matrix with a certain value, okay? And usually these entries are Gaussian or sub-Gaussian, okay? And it's nice to compute. There is nice trick to compute. It's a product of two matrices, and it gives this result. So, okay, we are talking about starting from n to the cube to, for instance, here for the Gaussian case, which is the most complex, n to the power 2 to the max of the size of your random matrices, okay, and so on. So it's not a lot, but still, okay, yeah.
So I was just wondering, the space for Gaussian, the cost in space is because you need to compute the full matrix, the
Yes.
full kernel, the
Yeah.
full kernel before you project.
Yeah.
You
So,
can do it in a lazy way. You don't
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
have it in memory.
yeah, absolutely. You're right.
Okay,
And
no, I was
yeah.
just
You
checking.
you
Okay.
complete, yeah. So on the fly, or
Yeah.
there are many ways to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I was wondering, what about the statistical performance?
Yeah.
Because what I want to say, but for this n of x and ny you're introducing, strongly depend on the statistical performance. And if you want to reach a similar one to the one you get, if you consider a full data set, then you could be tempted to choose mx of order n. And then
Yeah,
you
you're
use-
perfectly right. So we're going to study that. You're perfectly right. This is the interesting question. You're perfectly right. This is the goal, in fact. And so, again, it will also, when we look at sample complexity, it will also depends also on the kind of sketching we are doing. But the big picture is here. Okay. So the big picture is here to look at effectively the statistical guarantee. So we write here we study, I mean, this classic expectation of distances, and we have 3 terms basically. I mean, the first term is a class. Okay, I'm going to. If you give me a while, I'm going to show you the assumption. And don't worry, I won't skip this. Sorry for that. If you accept just for a moment that we don't see the assumption, but just to give the big picture. So we have here a classic term, okay, which is linked to the, let's say, the regression error. So that, I mean, we cannot avoid it. There is an error in terms of the data. But as you say, there is an input reconstruction error and output reconstruction error because this approximation make our estimator weaker. Okay. And the good thing, and that's why we wanted to have this orthogonal projector on psi of x, we are still capable to study our risk in the case of the norm of hx or the norm of hy, okay? And we use that. So here, I say risk is not a risk, but we use this idea, the reconstruction error that you make when you apply this low rank orthogonal projection, okay? You have to pay for it, okay? So we have these two terms, okay? And we can go a bit further. And so here I have two choices. I can show you maybe what I can do. I can show you the assumption and then come back to the more detailed case of, for instance, in the case of sub-Gaussian sketching, having an idea of the sample complexity. So what is the value for mx and my to get a good performance? So let me just, sorry, I have to go to the appendix. Let me just tell you a bit more about the assumption. I mean, some of them are rather classical. You will recognize it at once. Okay. So first, we assume that there is an attainability assumption. Okay, so that our solution, okay, H star is in the right set. Okay. And for that, we assume that there exists indeed an operator H such that H star is written like that. Second, we have a classic assumption about bounded kernels, okay, the scalar one, okay. And then we have what people call capacity conditions. I have to note that the conditions must be satisfied on both sides, x and y, okay. And here, well, of course, you are going to look, basically, the capacity condition is that your problem has a signature. The signature of the problem is a covariance operator, okay, in that case, okay. And here, because the kernel I'm using, the identity decomposable kernel, made usage of kernel on X, kernel on Y. In fact, I'm going to find these two covariance operators, and we are going to be interested in the spectrum, okay, of this operator. And this kind of capacity condition is to tell you to see, well, you look at the trace of the covariance operator to some power, okay, and you see how much it is truncated, how much it is in finite dimension. Okay, so this is, I would say, classical one. It's written sometimes differently, but this is, let's say, so gamma x and gamma y tells you to each point your problem is structural. To each point your problem, you could approximate it by low rank approximation because in fact there is a gap in the eigenvalue. And this one, okay, so this one I have to say it's a bit complex to explain it. I'm going to tell you why. Okay, it's something that was used in a paper of not Chizai Bach, but one of the students of Francis Bach and colleagues. So it's something that people have already leveraged because there are many papers about leverage score, the rank approximation. And so, okay, the idea is the following. Here, I can say that for X and Y, so there is a line which is missing. But the idea is you take this for each X, okay, in a big X, okay. If you look at this operator, one rank operator built on from psi y, okay, then you remember this inequality. So if you take this operator minus the other one, it's a semi-definite positive constraint, okay, whatever the sense, okay. And so with this power of the covariance, okay, yeah, it's a kind of embedding property. So it tells you that if you consider your covariance operator to the power 1 minus mu, I mean for any, in the case of x, for any x, if you look at the rank 1 covariance for any x you can construct, it is always not that far from the covariance. So, I see this embedding property as the ability to trust this covariance operator is let's say reflect well the behavior or even single data. Okay, so and we need that in fact, otherwise we need. So given this, sorry, it's almost I think it's almost sure. That's much surely. As much surely. Yeah, as much surely. Almost surely. Okay, sorry. I'm a bit long, so I'm looking at time. But yeah, we can come back on that. Okay, so to come back to your question, so that this is something we are going to pay attention on. Okay, if you go further, okay, what you are interested in is exactly what you say: sample complexity, how much I can draw and embed. Okay, and so we got this inequality. Okay, we have different inequality depending of different sketching matrices. Okay, so okay, what you can look at is gamma value like 1 or for instance just to 1 or 2 to give you give you ideas. In practice, it's a bit tight. In fact, the regime where m is enough big to not have a too bad approximation and to get a good result. I mean, m is here, n is here, and as you said, we are tempted to go very close to m, but then it's not very interesting in terms of computation. Okay, so yeah, there is a trade-off which is not easy, and which is a bit better in the case of a specific Gaussian sketching. Okay, and this I would say we have it for free, so we are not taking let's say authorship for this. We just plug, I mean, the result we have in the results of Rudy and colleagues, who have proved that when you have the square loss and also the Euler property, so you govern your risk of excess risk of f here, f tilde, by the excess risk of h tilde. Okay, and then we get this. And you see with the max, okay, there is a not exactly yeah, there is not exactly the same. Well, we have not exact symmetry here, but this is what we have. Okay, I'm going to finish by saying two things, if I can have 5 minutes. Okay, first, I want this gave us idea. We also do a lot of functional output regression, and this gave us an idea. In the case I want to solve a problem where more expressivity is needed, and let's say that I have a chance of having more data. So what I would like is to keep my loss, but abandon, it's very hard, my vector valued RKHS.
You can do it.
In that case, I can do it. I do some cure. In that case, what you do, you can use a very simple trick, which is quite well known. Okay, so you are going to use an expansion in the truncated orthonormal basis provided by sketching. Okay, so you have a neural network. Just the last layer is a finite dimension. Okay, and just compute the expansion in the basis of random feature defined by the sketching. Okay, so of course it works well, and it's interesting. So this is just the sketching. So sketching input, sketching output, KR. But I want to show this case when you. So again, it's not the data we are currently looking at in other other work, for instance with Remy, but still it's a text to molecule problem. Okay, so we leverage a transformer, even a transformer dedicated to language, like the SciBERT. Okay, in fact we use a very simple output kernel here because it's a cosine kernel applied to a molecule 2-vec, so it's already a very informed kernel, if I can say. Okay, and with this, we can get rather a nice result. Let's say state of the art a little bit. After these problems are so difficult that you use the hit score, or let's say the top accuracy to assess the quality of these results. Okay, so what you do, you use several predictions, let's say 10, and you look at the probability of having the ground truth. Okay, because it's quite hard. Maybe it's beginning to be broken when we have a much larger data set and even more powerful approaches. Okay, so I'm going to finish. I want to tell you that this is a simple example of what we can do with kernels, so a little bit in a different way as usual. Okay, so I think this idea of using kernel in a loss function, it's absolutely interesting. Of course, here you have just seen the square loss, but now you can imagine that you can build the epsilon sensitive loss with a norm in the output Hilbert space HY. You can do many kind of losses. In fact, as we have a Reporter theorem, we can go behind, but then in terms of guarantee, okay, it's a bit more complex than the Euler cases. Okay. Just a word to make the link with Remy's talk. Okay, so when as you have seen, we have. So I did not say a lot about kernel, did I? Okay, so the kernel between graph here was a bag of substructure kernel, okay, and we took a Gaussian kernel, for instance, in some application, not all. And the idea here that surrogate regression problem allow you to overcome the lack of differentiability of your kernel. Okay. Of course, if you have a differentiable kernel, this is another story. But when you think about a differentiable kernel, you think about graph isomorphisms, and very quickly you go towards optimal transport, and you have a definition of the similarity, which is variational, and that take into account all the possible plan or either size is fixed permutation. Okay. And now there is another work we are doing with several students. Is you can learn, of course, the feature map. Okay. If you learn the feature map, okay, you have something very powerful, because the decoding becomes differentiable as well. So that's very interesting. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Question. Some questions have already been asked. The most important one.
But ultimately, when you have to use it, let's say that the graphs to have pages.
Yeah.
And at the end, you have to come back.
Yeah.
Is this a tricky problem? Or how,
Yeah.
because I see that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you
coming up here and check it out.
no, you're perfectly right.
Ah,
Okay, I can give you more insight on that.
How does it done in practice? Or, in
Yeah.
implement this,
Yeah.
computation aspect?
Yeah, well, computation, we can see it. Yes, so basically, with or without alpha I or tilde or hat, the idea that in our case, yes, you have some score now, and your score, let's say it's a function j of x and y, okay, and you are searching the best y given an x, okay, and you search among a candidate set. So the first thing, if you do like that, it means that in your problem, this is the case for molecules, for instance, but this is also the case for other structured output problem, like predict a node in a graph or predict a class in a hierarchy of classes. Well, it means that you have candidate set. In fact, you know where you are looking at, okay? Of course, if now the loss that you are using is differentiable, you have two options. I mean, first, you don't go for surrogate regression. You directly use a differentiable loss, okay? It certainly implies a relaxation of the graph representation, okay? But you can also leverage the two, okay? So if you have, you can still, like we say, learn the feature map phi of y, still for, again, for maybe frugality reason, keep the idea that it's better to learn a neural network with a very large vectorial output that learn an embedding. Okay, let's say it learns the embedding psi of y. Okay, and then decode it, but this way, if you have a minimization and you know how to derive this, if this is a neural network, well, do gradient. Okay, it's a minimization problem, and you can solve it. Okay, so in molecular elucidation, we will make the choice according the amount of data you have and the type of problematic. If it's what I call molecular retrieval, which is a large part of the problem they have, okay, they know a database of potential molecules. Okay, so at least you have it. It can be complex to compute, but you have it. Okay, but if you want to do de novo discovery, you need an end-to-end approach. You need effectively to be able. So, in fact, here we are able to generalize and to give, in fact, a continuous output. But the problem is here, as you say. And so either it is differentiable, so we are saved, okay? Either it is not, and in this case, so having developed with my colleagues different approaches, I will say the following. In case of low or medium dataset size, if I can, I will always go for techniques that have statistical guarantees, okay, and that I know well. Okay. If we have extra large dataset, and we need a lot of expressivity, of course, and we want to do de novo discovery, of course, we need to go for differentiable loss and maybe abandon the surrogate regression. But I have to say it's not completely sure. I don't know if I can talk about the current work, but if you really learn an excellent graph representation with good property, editing property, maybe it's still interesting to do the surrogate regression problem with an encoding that you have now. Yeah, please.
I have a question then, because the thing is, don't you lose unicity of your decoding when you use the low rank? You know, when you do the sketching of your kernel, are you going to have several Ys that basically lead to the same embeddings by construction?
So anyway, the psi is not invertible, so there is no hope. Okay, but I'm trying to take the best of them. Okay, and so yeah, you can yeah, it's, but I would say also like the definition of kernel itself. I mean, if you don't take enough accurate kernel, you won't be able to retrieve very interesting candidate. But in this case, in the case specifically that you point out, yes, in fact, that's why you have approximation. So you don't want to approximate too much. Plus, this approximation depends on the data. Okay, so it's something. But yes, you have let's say a tight pass. Okay, if you look at the statistical guarantee, you have a tight pass, but you have paths where you don't lose too much in terms of generalization.
Maybe you're safe because you're discrete, and so you have this kind of rounding that maybe, you know, the error, as long as it brings you
You're
close
right.
enough.
At the end, at the very end, I discretize everything. I mean, at the end, we have just so the comparing to the true, let's say, true distance, distance between graph. Okay, maybe the approximation error is not that, maybe it's not that bad, and it doesn't hurt.
Okay.
But that I haven't checked carefully. That's a good point. Okay.
So let us thank